Welcome to the Franchisee Show, where we hear about the stories and secrets of the franchise pros. Today, we are talking to Brody King. Brody is someone who, like many of us, has taken his passion and translated it into a business venture. With a background in economics and athleticism, he has found a melding of the two with Restore Hyper Wellness. We really get to delve into how he and his team have focused on revamping their business through setting in place proper plans and systems. Brody emphasizes the 3 C's, as he calls them: culture, crew, and challenge, and how his involvement with the 3 C's is evolving as his business grows. With big aspirations for his business, Brody talks about the importance of data, planning, and that there is no substitute for hard work. We really enjoyed our opportunity to talk to Brody, and we think you will too. I'm Jessica Elgin, and I'm here today with our own franchise pro, Don Pierce.
Great to be here, Jessica.
Thanks, Don. We've also got a special guest with us today. We're here live with Brody King. Today we're going to be talking about revamping growth and what change is needed to incur that growth. So, Brody, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, and Don, take it away.
Well, Brody, I think you've got a unique background that's led right into the business you're growing. Tell us a little bit about how do you take something that's a hobby, something you love, and turn it into a business?
Yeah, great question. I have certainly a background in sports and athletic performance. I never played professionally, but played several sports at a pretty high level and competed in Ironman triathlons. And always been sort of a data geek. That's my academic background. I have an economics degree and an MBA, and I love data. And so prior to starting with Restore, I was in consulting, management consulting for a data analytics company. And I was kind of looking into doing my own thing with sports performance and data analytics in terms of using the data from your workouts, specifically swim, bike, and run for Ironmans, and turning that into better performance on race day. So there's a lot of really cool biohacking technology out there in terms of something that I was particularly interested in and still am is kind of like the Internet of Things and like wearables for the athletic performance. So there's things that, there's a company out there that you have kind of a patch that goes in your skin, and in real time, you can get access to your electrolyte status during a race. Wow. So for something like an endurance race, like an Ironman, that type of data is something that I geek out about and know that it sort of can be the difference between a mediocre performance and a personal best. And at first, I was kind of looking into that and doing my own thing. And I discovered Restore really as a customer first and really fell in love. And, fast forward 18 months, 2 years, and here we are. And that was sort of the impetus for, becoming a franchisee and joining Restore.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about, as a franchisor, what did they give you that helped you start your business?
Yeah, certainly a lot of resources from a marketing, construction, PR, risk mitigation. All of those resources were tremendously helpful and certainly de-risked the operation as far as I saw it. I am still a pretty young entrepreneur, and this is my first go at a real life. It's not a side hustle. This is my first kind of taking the plunge, burning the boats, and going all in. I think that the biggest resource that they gave me was people. And that was ultimately the decision for me why I chose to join the franchise instead of do my own thing. Mm-hmm. Steve and Jim, the CEO and chairman of Restore, are just remarkable human beings and people that I would want to do business with regardless. And so that's ultimately the best resource that they've given me, is those new friendships and relationships that I see going on for a lifetime.
So you just opened your second location. How were they helpful in that versus the first? Did they bring you additional things in picking the second one?
They did. We've definitely grown in terms of sophistication as an organization. There's a little bit more data to our previous point in terms of selecting a retail location. So we've got a little more sophistication in terms of the right strip mall with the right demographics. So that has improved. We have sort of an equipment team and a construction team now, which was the case when I started, but it was a little scrappier,
Sure.
to be fair. I think I was the 9th location, my first location, and my second location is number 21 in the ecosystem.
Oh, that's
Okay.
cool.
And I believe there's Jim Donnelly, the CEO of Restore, was at my house on Thursday, and spent the day with him kind of talking expansion. And I believe there's 50 plus LOIs signed across the country with a lot of ambitions to continue to grow and build something tremendous. In terms of resources, they're really ramping up on a marketing side of things, which is extremely helpful. You know, operationally, they've always been extremely sound. In particular, with what we do at Restore, there is risk because what we do in the modalities, we make physiological impact to our customers. You know, it's the idea of helping people feel better so they can do more of what they love to do. But that doesn't come without risk. And they've always been very, very sort of draconian about customer safety first. So that's always been there. And I've always really, really appreciated that. Between 1 and 2, I think the biggest sort of macro change is marketing. You know, we're getting more sophisticated about pre-sales. We're getting more sort of dialed in on who the buyer personas are, and getting a grand opening event together with all the PR and
Nice.
word of mouth and boots on the ground effort that needs to happen. The franchisor has been nothing but helpful.
Great.
So I'm curious, Brody, and I think a lot of our listeners are in the same situation. They start with 1 or 2 stores, and then they do have goals to expand. I know you're looking to do 10 more in the next couple of years. That's a pretty big jump. What do you have to do differently opening the additional stores than you did originally? What has changed?
The thing that comes to mind is document what you do and do what you document.
I love it.
That's the biggest thing for me in terms of scalability and growth. The franchisor has tremendous procedures and policies in play, but I'm only as good as my processes. And so in particular, as I grow into states that I don't live and I can't brute force customer acquisition just by way of my own network, which has been the case for my first 2 stores. I have to be a lot more thoughtful about the documentation and the policies and procedures and, you know, planning up front. And so on my whiteboard here, I've got plan the work the plan. Mm-hmm. And that's another sort of cheesy expression that I use with my team, and something that will be sort of the pinnacle of how we expand and grow, you know, documentation and planning the work, and then just working the plan. Sounds easy, but easier said than done, as you know.
Yeah.
No.
Always.
And that leads right into, as an executive, how do you see your role changing as you go from 2 locations to 10? What will you have to do differently?
I think that the first 2 locations, I have loved being in the store. I love our customers. And I love spending time with them and meeting them and getting to know them and building rapport and relationships with them. And that's something that bandwidth has allowed for. I definitely see myself and am planning to transition into managing the culture, the crew, and the challenge. You know, those 3 C's are something that I think about a lot. And so I suspect most of my time will be with my management team and with employees instead of with customers. And that the lion's share, at least of my time, is going to be towards sort of reinforcing the culture, reinforcing what our core values are, and making sure that we're hiring consistent with those core values. I think that's something that's massively important to me, is that we have to hire people who already embody the core values that are important to me. There's a lot that I can do with someone who wants to deliver wow through service, which is my sort of main core value. I think that that's something that we at Restore can be best in class, world class at, better than anybody else. And if you don't start with that desire, it's a much different conversation than if you do start with that desire and you want to deliver a world-class experience, but you may lack in other areas.
Right.
I can do a lot more with that employee versus the other scenario. And so I think that long-winded answer, apologize, but I think that's how my role sort of transforms and evolves as I grow, is reinforcing the core values, reinforcing the culture, making sure that we got the right crew, and making sure that they're challenged in the right ways so that we can grow.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, you're certainly, from my experience, focusing on the things that a lot of people stub their toes and fail when they try to grow. They don't think about how they change and how they build an organization. And the one thing that I really can echo back to you is getting the right people. I always looked at hiring key folks. They have attributes and skills. Skills you can train. But if they don't have the right attributes, if they don't have the right attitude coming in, they're never going to change. So I think you're spot on that
Right.
one. So
I think that's pretty valuable, because you've seen it on a large scale when you're taking a huge organization and transitioning them through. And I think that we hear that theme quite a bit, where as you're transitioning your position, the thing that got you into it, that passion, being with your clients, is something that's going to go away. So you've got to be able to overcome that. Don, do you have any tricks of the trade that help with overcoming that loss, so to speak?
yeah, not really. I don't think there's any tricks to the trade other than thinking ahead. You know, as you grow your organization, your time horizon has to go farther out. And you've got to be the person that's really leading the organization by looking out 2 to 3 years. You're starting to do that with saying, here's the number I'd like to have. Here's the things I've got to focus on. Here's what I want coming in.
Right.
But I think that's really key. The other one would be, for me, is to define the 2 or 3 things that you are going to want to really focus on to be able to measure the progress of the business, because you won't be able to get your arms around it all anymore like you can with 1 or 2.
Right.
So what are those 2 or 3 things? Have you thought about that? As you're opening your 9th and 10th locations, what's going to let you know that they're opening well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot about how we keep score in that way. Having kind of a data analytics background, I think sometimes to a fault. I overanalyze things. So I'm learning that skill set too, right? Like, what's the right amount of information to have to make a key decision, and what's too much and what's too little. I love the Powell 60-40 principle, if you're familiar with that. But in terms of keeping score specifically, what I love about the franchisor, we measure based upon number of people we help. Mm-hmm. And so that's a customer foot traffic number. But the way we think about it is, how many services did we perform? And how did we help more people do more of what they love to do?
Yeah.
Right.
So the mission of the business is to democratize wellness. And that to us means 2 things. The modalities that you see inside of the 4 walls have been around for quite some time. They're not necessarily new or cutting edge. Historically, though, they've been the purview of the rich and famous and sort of unattainable to the average person.
Yeah. And
so people who are paid to perform, LeBron James, people in Hollywood, they do things differently to their bodies. And because they're paid to perform, they can't afford. LeBron spends, for example, $4 million a year on his body to recover. Mm-hmm. Most of us don't have that luxury. But the good news is, at Restore, you can do what LeBron James does to his body to recover for $100 a month, basically. And so really, when we talk about keeping score and measuring success, we are membership based. So the incentives for the staff and the team, that's our high leverage metric. Are we converting new customers to members? Mm-hmm. And what does that metric look like? So I pay attention to that. And the numerator and denominator change over time, right? Like, if we have 100% new member conversion, we only had 2 customers, that's a lot different than 10% with 1,500 people coming through the door. Right. And they're both, they're very different. So I do pay attention to the absolute value of the numbers, the numerator and denominator there, and new membership acquisition. We also look at retention. But ultimately, what I'm looking at is services performed. So I think that's nuanced in one specific way that I'll call out. It's not necessarily about butts through the door, like constantly getting foot traffic through the door. It's about performing services. And that could mean one customer comes in and does 50 services in a month. Yeah. We measure that as massively successful because we're helping that person feel better and do more of what they love to do. Right. Chronic fatigue and inflammation and oxidative stress are sort of our two main, I'll call conditions that we try and solve for with sort of holistic, utilizing your body's natural defense mechanisms against those two things, which are ultimately responsible for all kinds of debilitating conditions across the country. And so anything we can do to perform more services is how we keep score.
Okay. That's key. I mean, for a person at this stage of business, you've really hit on something that's really important that really big businesses sometimes don't learn or lose sight of. One of the things a really smart guy once told me is the next step as you grow the business and have multiple locations is that one or two key things that you measure, the people at the very start need to report that to you up the chain of command on a very regular basis. That's the way you reinforce that culture. So if you have a location manager that reports to you and there's a weekly measurement, you want them to somehow face you and say, this is what we measured this week. And you know what they're doing that way, and they know that that's important to you.
That's very cool. So Brody, I'm curious. I know that you said that they help you kind of find the locations and where they're at. Do you plan as you're expanding to 10 more locations? Are you planning on staying pretty central, pretty concise, or are you looking at expanding across the nation?
I have a young family and I love them dearly. 2 kids and a beautiful, very supportive wife, which Wonderful. None of this happens without her. Yeah. And so I'm really cognizant of that lifestyle. And so I want to be within an hour and a half flight of any of my locations. And so that's sort of how I'm thinking about that. There's a lot of really attractive markets inside of a 90-minute flight of Salt Lake City. And so I'm not really willing to make the trade-off of massive travel and time away from family. I've already lived that life. And now I've got a 6-year-old son and a 6-month-old daughter, and I want to be home.
Awesome.
Good for you.
That is very cool.
Well, you've gone through an interesting phase here. So tell me, for our listeners who'd like to know this, what is the one piece of advice you'd give someone that's just going to be starting into the restore business?
It's a really good question. There's several things that come to mind right away, and I'm trying to dismiss them as like the superficial answers and give you the real meaty stuff. I think that for one, it's not a cash grab. There's no substitute for hard work. It's not turnkey, and I don't think any business is turnkey. You're going to have to work very hard all the time. It's uphill the whole way. There's no substitute for being a natural advocate for what we do at Restore. And that is what ultimately energizes me, is I get to be surrounded by really passionate employees who love to take care of people and see people feel better and do more of what they love. And it can be hard to lose sight of that, with the stress and the anxiety of managing the P&L and growth and people and all the things that come with being a business owner. But I think that, the core value of democratizing wellness and helping people do more of what they love to do, you have to have that, and you can't fake that either.
Yeah, right.
So I think that if that is compelling and that resonates with any prospective franchisee, it's an extraordinarily rewarding opportunity. But I think that you have to ultimately, we're for sure in the people business, and so you have to take the good with the bad, I guess, in that way. But if you like helping other people, I've seen a lot of our customers who come in and have certain goals with their lives, and that comes from a wide spectrum, right? It could be, I want to get out in the garden more, but I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I've heard that whole body cryotherapy can help me, kind of reduce inflammation and get out there. To, I want to qualify for Kona, the World Championship Ironman.
Right.
And I know that what you guys do can help me get that edge and recover quickly. You can only train as hard as you can recover. And we have customers that spread the gamut in terms of that whole spectrum. I gave you kind of two extremes, but ultimately what I think is so compelling about Restore is we are eliminating excuses and roadblocks that have historically prevented people from living their best life. And that to me is massively rewarding.
Yeah. That's amazing. Your answer is amazing, because that, for people that tune into this and they're thinking about becoming a franchisee, you couldn't say it any better. It's not a money grab. If it's not something you love, if it's not something you're going to be passionate about, you're not going to be successful in the business, no matter how well it's structured.
And I love what you said about it's always uphill. It is always uphill. But I think that's what Don and I had this conversation earlier. I think what keeps you interested in a business, and most of our viewers are entrepreneurs, what keeps you interested is that challenge. And if you don't have that challenge, you might not pursue it. So I think the passion is what gets you in there. I think you're a great example of that. Really appreciate your insights on what it's going to take going from that passion into something that's bigger. And when we change, what we're going to have to revamp to do that. So I think that's been a great insight. Thank you for your time today, Brody. We really appreciate it. Restore sounds like an amazing company for you. Like, it just seems like it embodies everything about you from the time you were 3 years old. So not just something now. Yeah. And Don, thank you for your insights. As always, it's great to have a true pro in the industry who has had the experience there. So
yeah, well, this is enjoyable. And I live in Las Vegas, so I'm within an hour and a half flight. I can't wait till you open a location and come in and visit.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, please tune in again. If you like this show, please like it and watch our other ones. This is the Franchisee Show, where we share the secrets and stories of the franchise pros. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. For more episodes, go to thefranchiseshow.com.